Architectural Builders Supply is pleased to present you with this recording of the technical question that is listed in the title of this video.
This call may be monitored and recorded for quality assurance.
This about that video because it's kind of a unique situation and there aren't a lot of resources out there. But basically it had to do with the, I think it's techless or sauce type hinge in a trapdoor situation. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I get the idea.
We have a historic porch on an old house that has a set of stairs that descend through the porch into the historic basement. And we have a porch floor that goes over top of the exit. And basically, I was considering a sauce type hinge, but in that video, this is to be clear, this is an outdoor situation. In that video with the woman on the phone, you talked through the tolerances of the hinge and the 8mm sort of being an absolute tolerance on the hinge. We aren't using a vinyl tile. We're using Douglas fir as the flooring material, and we would have more than enough space to mortise out. But my question is, with that 1/8 inch distance between the top of the floor surface and where the mortise would happen for this type of hinge, my concern is that if people are walking over, you know, the floor that is holding the hinge in place on each side, you know, like both the door side and the sidewall side, that you would end up with chipping or wear and tear on the Douglas fir with only that 0.8mm of material over top of the hinge. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, it's not 0.8mm or 1/8 inch. It's the E dimension. And
Sorry, yes, correct.
Yeah, I wouldn't share that concern. And the reason is because the wood that you're not mortising out, the E dimension, is resting on the hinge itself. So there's not a void underneath.
Correct.
Yeah, so I wouldn't be concerned. Depending on the hinge, that E dimension could be a 1/4 inch. So, you know.
So you feel comfortable with the Texas style hinge?
Yeah. Well, I didn't say Texas. I'm not. Sauce I would be comfortable with.
Okay. Yeah, that was going to be my next question. If there was, because there's the 3 hinges that I've seen mentioned, and I can't remember them all. I was looking at the checklist, but I didn't know if there was a form factor or a performance factor, especially with it being outside and arguably, you know, being outside, whether there might be some grit or unintentional introduction of like water to the hinge over time, whether one of them would perform better than others.
Yeah, you don't want Texas. That's unnecessarily expensive. I would go with sauce, and I would do a non-ferrous version of a sauce hinge. They do make them that are stainless.
Can you say just say that one more time? Non-ferrous? Is that what you said?
Not non-ferrous, meaning it doesn't contain
non-ferrous.
Yeah. So
non-ferrous. And in terms of these, we were thinking about doing a Bilco door approach, which is to say 2 door leaves, because we were concerned, I think, in part about just the weight of the door if it was one piece. It's a fairly large portal. So is there like a heavier duty version of the sauce? Because a lot of the ones you see online look kind of small. It's hard to tell what the exact size of it is because it's usually, you know, imaged in a blank or white space. But
well, what you need to do, first of all, the hinge isn't going to be carrying any load, so it's going to be doing no work. So I wouldn't worry about needing something heavy duty, so to speak, and I would govern my decision based on the thickness of the door. And then when it comes to having a feel for the size, you need to look at the template. So how thick is the door?
Right. So that's the most complicated question in the world because the door doesn't exist yet. And I know that doesn't sound like it would make it complicated, but let me just explain. What we're currently targeting as the approach for the door would introduce 4 pieces. So below the door would be 2 large pieces of like 2x6 frame that would be built out to essentially ensure that the door had no flexion in it when it was closed. Each of those pieces would go in separately. They're kind of heavy by themselves. Those do exist, but the door itself would need some kind of reinforcement behind it. So I can't tell you it's strictly the thickness of the floor slats. It's going to be the floor slats plus some kind of back-mounted framing that goes above the framing I mentioned that goes below it. So 4 pieces, like 2 pieces of framing below, and then 1 door and a second door to create those Bilco leaves. Those doors, how thick they would be, we could fabricate them to any thickness you'd recommend in theory, but it has to have enough, rigidity and back framing to keep it square, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I would consider structural lumber somewhere in the process because of how dimensionally stable it is. And,
right.
It sounds like they're going to be at least 1.5 inches. So I might be looking at the SOS 218. If it's going to be in that range, there is a stainless steel version of that hinge.
Okay. And stainless steel, just so we're on the same page, because I'm not an engineering person, is the non-ferrous type you were recommending?
Absolutely, yeah. We'll do stainless steel base material on hinges like this. We did a large train terminal in the Middle East where it's all outside. Just think of any subway system you've been on. All that hardware is exposed to the elements. So you'd be looking at hardware that's non-ferrous. And yeah, SOS has you've got to figure out the thickness. And once you know that, you're just going to pick the hinge that best goes along with that. If you can get to 2 inch thick, then you're going to have a super robust hinge. Use 2 of them per leaf, and you're done. Check back in the next century. You're great.
Awesome. So that was the SOS 216, I think you said.
Well, depending on the thickness, if you're going to get
what was the 2 inch? What was the 2 inch? I'll just tell them to shoot at 2 inches, and then what was the hinge?
Yeah, you could go for like a 418 or a 420. A 420 SS would be a good hinge to use. That might be overkill for the application. So target, take a look at the SOS 420 SS, and I'll gladly email you a link to it so you can see it. And then just know that, if you go thinner, there's a hinge that will accommodate something thinner.
Okay. Yeah, if you want to send me a couple of options in sort of the range of potential door thicknesses. And again, is there a guide that would come with any of these purchases that would help us to template out and mortise and know that we're putting the hinge in the right place? I worry a little bit about giving this to my contractors and they would goof it up.
Well, there's a guide. There are installation aids that will accompany the order when they're ordered. So a guide, the template, the router bit. I can intimately explain and discuss with the installer how to do this.
Okay. The SOS 420 SS, you mentioned we'd be good to go. How much should I expect that to cost? Because the one I'm seeing online costs $411 for arguably maybe 1 hinge.
It's well less than that. Those are 200.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, say again. How much did you think it would be?
The 420, which we don't know if it's going to be the hinge you need, is $267. You can also do, the primary components in SOS hinges are zinc, so they're not, much of it is non-ferrous to begin with. Your application may not truly require stainless, where you can get the cost of this hinge down to a fraction of that if you just went with the standard.
Yeah, and to be fair, this porch is covered, and we've got gutters on this porch, and I've been watching. I mean, it's very early days, so I can't tell you with like comprehensive data that water would never get into these hinges, but I suspect it would take a good like rainstorm before that would happen. So if it's infrequent wetting, maybe once every month and a half or something, once a month maybe, would the zinc finish on the traditional hinge be enough? Probably.
If it was me, I would use stainless, but that's
okay.
I'm a hinge salesman, and it's the proper way to. It is the proper hinge to specify for an exterior application. Period. Can you value engineer it and go with the standard hinge? You can, and when the hinge goes to $60 each, you can replace those 4 times before you get to the cost of one hinge. And that's probably decades and decades that you're going to, so the proper
to be fair, to be fair to this conversation, and you may not have smelled it on me yet, but like I bought a historic home. Everything I do is about value proposition. So you don't have to push me very hard as a hinge salesman to convince me that, buying 4 of these hinges might be the better investment. But I do think it's important to buy the right size hinge for the application. So how comfortable would you be, one, with selling me the hinge, because I think you should get a return on this conversation with me, and 2, talking through with the contractors who would fabricate the door, what hinge best suits the design.
Yeah, I do have to monetize the conversation somehow. If it was me knowing what you're doing, I would go with the standard hinge and not the stainless, and it's only because a home that's like that, it never ends with finding places to spend money. So helping specify the proper hinge is part of what I do, and then after I get the order, taking ownership of making sure the installer understands how to install it is something that I do as well.
That'd be awesome, Richard. I mean, you are the only person so far, based just on the YouTube video alone, who I felt could authoritatively answer these questions. And talking to you makes me really feel even more confident about that. So I would like to do that if you're comfortable with it. And I have no problem buying the hinges through you. I guess my question is, you kind of pulled your punch. It seems like you were pulling your punch a little bit there and recommending the standard hinge and not the stainless. I thought we just agreed that the stainless was going to be the sort of safer choice. What were you thinking there?
It's the proper hinge for the application. But the home I grew up in was built, 100 years ago. So I can appreciate, a lot of my customers have historic homes that, the flow of money never ends, because something that's 80, 100 years old is not as good as something built today. And bringing it up.
Well, let me give it a little bit more color. This house was built in 1771.
Yeah,
we're talking about 250 years old.
Yeah, I would spend the money on something that you're going to see. The reason you walk into a Dunkin' Donuts and the privacy lever is broken, because those guys know that it's better to buy the $50 ones and just replace them when some drunk comes in and breaks it, rather than buy the $400 ones. That's the approach. So that's if my suggestion to you is that you consider that. I maintain that if it was my 18th century home, I would put the stainless in, because I would never worry about rusting. What part of the country are you in?
We're in Maryland. It is a fairly damp state, all things considered. I wanted to suggest that you tell me what failure would look like, and you just said the word rust. My feeling is increasingly that I would want to get the stainless, because whether you're being a good salesman or not, I just don't want to worry about it. I mean, I'm 40 years old now. I could probably live to be twice that age, and I would never want to have this conversation again about these hinges in this door. That might be overly optimistic because maybe the wood would fail before the hinge. But from what I gather, that shouldn't be the case. It should last a good 20 years, and then we could re-floor over top of the door in theory. So.
Yeah, I mean, if I was writing a specification, a hardware set for this opening, I would be detailing stainless hinges.
I'm sorry, stainless. Yeah.
Because my mandate is to suit the best interests of the owner in terms of what the right stuff to use, not the least expensive stuff to use. When we specify, we're not working on a budget when we specify. That comes after sticker shock.
So let me ask you another question about the hinge, soft hinge type. I've just told you that we can, up to a certain point, design the door around the hinge and vice versa. You've already communicated to me that's possible. I want to let you have a conversation with the contractors. They may not, have all the answers when you talk to them, but they could maybe, between you and a little planning, figure out what the right hinge and door design is. Shouldn't be too complicated, but my question is just, so it seems like every version of this conversation ends with a mortise that does somewhat eat into the Douglas fir flooring itself. Is that inevitable? Should I tell them, yeah, you need to plan to mortise this hinge fairly close to the floor surface, not like super duper close, but it will eat into the flooring?
No, you have to follow the template. So the first thing to do is to get the template in the person's hand who's responsible for building the doors.
Sure, but I guess I'm only asking from a long-term perspective. If I needed to replace the flooring over top of this door, more than likely, based on how soft hinges work, I would need to mortise the new flooring material 20 years down the road to fit over top of the hinge. If I was deconstructing the door and putting it back together, I'd need to do that again, right? Depends
on how thick the flooring is. If it's thinner than the E dimension, then you don't have to if your E dimension isn't chewing into it, then you won't have to worry about it. Or it could be that it's all flooring. Depends on.
I'm going to say it's about half-inch thick flooring.
Oh yeah, you're definitely going to mortise into that. Yeah, you're definitely going to mortise into that.
Right. Yeah. So I'm thinking 20 years down the road, if I'm replacing the flooring and replacing the wood doors. Actually, you know what though? I had told them I wanted them to do a picture frame around the doors. So I guess it may not even touch flooring if I'm doing the picture frame that I was thinking about. So that's a moot point. Never mind. Now that I think about it, if I do picture framing around the inside of the leaf, around the outer edge of the leaf, and around the outside of the door set, then this thing's going to have structural rigidity for days, and the replacement would be a replacement of the picture frame pieces, not the flooring pieces that would sit inside the picture frame. So I'm just talking myself through that there. I don't know if you followed all that, but basically I don't think I have a question anymore.
There you go.
Yeah. All right. So what is the next step here to you, Richard? How would you prefer to proceed? Like, should I tell my contractors to call you? Can I then expect you would work it out with them and then tell me what the price is?
Yeah, I'm going to send you an email of a hinge, and I'll send you an email with like 2 or 3 hinges. You've got to look at that and get the template into the hand of the installer. And I mean, whoever's doing this obviously makes a living in construction, so this shouldn't be necessarily foreign to that person. If it is, that
That's
so, yeah. So tell me your email address.
Architectural Builders Supply hopes you have enjoyed this program. Again, thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.